When your own child turns away, a father's story of healing. Harold sat at the kitchen table, staring at the empty chair across from him. The house was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that carried a weight. At 68 years old, Harold had lived through much wars, factory layoffs, the loss of his beloved wife, but nothing cut deeper than the absence of his only son, Mark. The memories played like an old film reel in Harold's mind. He remembered working double shifts at the factory so Mark could have brand new shoes for school. He remembered cheering from the sidelines at Little League games, his voice hoarse from shouting encouragement. He remembered fishing trips where the boys' laughter bounced across the water, and late-night talks about life, when Mark was still small enough to believe his father had all the answers. Harold thought love was enough. He thought sacrifice was enough. But somewhere along the way, through teenage rebellion, heated arguments about responsibility, and the slow, silent drift of adulthood, Mark shut the door on him. The calls stopped, the visits disappeared. On holidays, Harold's phone stayed silent. Each birthday passed without a word. The empty chair at his kitchen table became the loudest thing in his home. At first, Harold carried shame. He asked himself questions that had no answers. Was I too strict, too stubborn? Did I expect too much? The questions haunted him at night. Loneliness filled his days like a shadow that refused to leave. He replayed every mistake, every argument, convinced that he alone had caused the distance. But grief has its stages, and in time, Harold realized something important. He could not change the choices his son had made. He could not carry the burden of guilt forever. And he could not spend the rest of his life waiting for a phone call that might never come. One cold evening, Harold decided to walk to the local community center. It was a small building, paint peeling from the sides, but the warm light from the windows drew him in. Inside, he found a circle of chairs, filled with men and women whose faces looked just like his, tired, hopeful, and marked by the quiet ache of family wounds. There was Margaret, whose daughter hadn't spoken to her in 10 years. There was Frank, who raised his grandchildren after his own son had vanished. And there were others, each with their own story of absence, of broken ties, of children who no longer looked back. They shared stories, they cried, they laughed at memories. For the first time in years, Harold felt something shift inside him. He realized he wasn't alone. His pain was shared by many, and in that shared pain came a strange kind of comfort. Over time, Harold began to rebuild. He started volunteering at the community center, tutoring children who had no grandparents nearby. Their small hands tugged at his sleeves, their innocent questions filled his days with laughter. One boy even asked, "Can you be my grandpa?" Harold felt his heart swell in a way he thought it never would again. He took up gardening, planting rows of tomatoes and sunflowers that leaned toward the sun. He began reading novels on his porch, waving at neighbors as they walked by. He played chess with old friends and learned that companionship didn't have to come only from blood, it could come from kindness, from shared time, from simple presence. The ache for his son never vanished completely. On holidays, Harold still set out an extra plate just in case. But the empty chair no longer felt like a wound, it felt like a reminder. A reminder that while love cannot always be forced, healing can still be chosen. Sometimes people asked him, "Do you still hope Mark will come back?" Harold would smile, his eyes soft with both sadness and peace. "Yes," he said, "but I don't wait for it anymore. Life is too short to sit in the dark, waiting for someone else's forgiveness. I choose to live, I choose to give love where it is welcome." And so, Harold's life continued, not perfect, not as he once imagined, but full in a new way. The garden bloomed, the children laughed, and the house, though quiet, was no longer lonely. The empty chair remained at his table, but it no longer haunted him. It reminded him that healing is possible, even when love is not returned in the way we hoped. It reminded him that no matter how much we lose, there is always more to give, always more to live for. Harold learned a truth that many in his position come to know: we cannot control how others love us, but we can always choose how we love ourselves and the world around us. And in that choice, we find peace.